If we're going to have a conversation about metabolic rate, it only makes sense to do that in the context of weight management. Now, this is one of the most written about, talked about, discussed topics in our industry. You constantly hear people talking about metabolic rate this, metabolic rate that. But I'll tell you that nobody wakes up on Tuesday morning and says, hey, you know what, I am at my goal weight. I'm super lean. I can't believe how healthy I am. Let me go check my metabolic rate to make sure it's operating. People don't care about metabolic rate. The only reason why this is on anyone's radar is because it relates to our body weight. So that's the filter we're going to use tonight. We're going to talk about it. We're going to say, here's how it translates into either staying at the weight you're at and or losing weight or preventing weight gain. And so that's really the context that we're looking at tonight. We're going to do three basic things. We're going to define metabolism for you. The term gets thrown around a lot, but let's have a very simple working knowledge of what do we mean when we say metabolism. So we'll do that. That'll take just a few seconds to do. And then what can we do to increase it? It is modifiable. You can change your metabolic rate, Libby. So let's break down the to-dos of what that looks like and put them into action steps for you guys. So you say, okay, if I'm going to put effort into it, this is what it looks like. And then we have to talk about food because you can't talk about weight without talking about food. Food, what we eat, is the impact player. But we're still going to talk about exercise. We're going to talk about metabolism and strength training. We can do things that move the needle in our direction to be more successful, Mary, but food is the impact player. So we have to make some concluding comments about food as it relates to your weight. So let's begin with defining what is metabolism. Biologically, it is the sum of all the metabolic processes in our body. Now, what does that mean? It means that everything that happens in my body requires energy. Muscles contracting, my heart beating, my lungs engaging in respiration, exchanging oxygen, cognition, the formation of proteins, hormones, enzymes. Everything that happens, digestion, requires energy. And so this is what we would call calories, right? Calories are energy. So what we're really saying here, Karen, is that metabolism is the totality of all the calorie-consuming reactions that take place in my body. That's what metabolic rate is. Metabolic rate is the rate at which it happens. So we'd say, gosh, how many calories do I use per minute to stay alive? How many do I use per day to stay alive? What does my body need? So if this is the process of energy use in an organism, and so we're talking about human beings tonight, let's talk about how we can change the rate at which we use calories. And by the way, do you want a high or a low metabolic rate? Generally, you want it to be high. And by the way, this is very counterintuitive to the survival of our species. Do you realize that a high metabolic rate is a liability to survival, right? Our ancestors were better positioned to have a low metabolic rate. Why? Because if I don't burn as many calories, I don't have to eat as much to stay alive. This is a bad shift biologically from an evolutionary standpoint. So what we're doing is we're going against biology. We're trying to position ourselves in a way that we wouldn't have wanted to do this 10,000 years ago. But today we're in the position of, right, food 24/7, right? So we're looking for ways to sort of edge our way out of this, we call it the gap, this 2018 food environment we live in. But just to understand, we're forcing the body to do something it would rather not do. It would rather keep metabolic rate low so I don't have to go out and hunt for food. However, right, Monty, I'm not hunting for food anymore. I'm not looking for food. In fact, food finds me most of the time. So we're going against our genes here to do this, but it can be done. So metabolic rate, let's break it down into three big categories. There's the basal metabolism, Shelley. That is 2/3 of what your body uses on a daily basis. This is what you need to stay alive. If Karen lays in bed all day, she will burn these calories. It's about 2/3 or a little higher of your energy needs. So it's the bulk of what you need is just to be alive, just to have your brain function, your lungs function. Everything that happens, Libby, will occur even if you're laying in bed. So that's basal metabolic rate. That's number one. That's 2/3 of the calories you burn, Marianne, is just to exist, right? Now, we can change basal metabolic rate because in that is skeletal muscle. If you have muscles on your body, Jim, your body likes to maintain those muscles, and so it takes energy to maintain those muscles. So if we change our muscle mass, we can change this number, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. But basal metabolic rate is sort of piece number one, 2/3 or more of the calories that you need. Then there is what we would loosely refer to as physical activity, formal movement. And we also would throw in that bucket what we call spontaneous physical activity. Formal physical activity, Mary and I go out for a walk. That's a planned event usually, right? We say, hey, let's go do a 2-mile walk, let's go do it. Let's take a bike ride, let me take a jog, whatever it might be that I'm doing, Monty. Planned physical activity. That does account for a decent chunk. It's nowhere near 2/3 to 70, but it's generally about 10 to 15% of total energy expended, depending upon what I am or am not doing. So that's planned activity. And then we're going to define this thing we call spontaneous physical activity in just a few moments too. But we kind of blend those two together. Spontaneous is things, Bill, where you just are tending to do these things because you're able to. You're active at home, you're cleaning the gutters, and that's not formal exercise, but that does chew up calories, it does use up energy. So there's physical activity, spontaneous physical activity in this medium category, and then there's what we delightfully refer to as the thermic response to feeding. So this used to be called the specific dynamic action of food. It simply means, Marianne, if you eat something, you burn calories. How many of you have heard this before? When digestion takes energy. If I eat an apple, I have to first do mechanical digestion, right? I have to break it down. There's chewing with my jaw muscles. There's additional digestion in the gut where the smooth muscles of the stomach churn the apple up and mix it up with digestive enzymes. So mechanical digestion takes energy. Then if that apple happened to be hot, maybe it was apple pie and maybe it was warm and it had to be cooled to a certain temperature before it leaves the digestive tract, before it leaves the stomach. That's thermal digestion. That does take energy too. You can't just take a piping hot drink of something and have it go right into the intestines. It's not how your body works. The fluid has to be brought to a certain temperature before it enters into the body. So there's thermal digestion. That takes energy, Libby. And then there's enzymatic digestion, little proteins that further chop up that food into little tiny macronutrient building blocks so it can then pass across the intestinal wall into the blood and go where it's supposed to go. So this is the thermic response to feeding, and it gets a lot of attention, but it really is something we shouldn't waste our time thinking or talking about because it is a very small piece of the pie. We could say, Karen, that thermal response to feeding accounts for maybe 10% of your total energy expenditure, and if you start to micromanage it, you might be able to tweak maybe 10 to 15% of that. So 10% of 10% is a really small number, Bill. You're going to walk a tightrope to burn an extra 20 calories. I'd say don't worry about it. Don't worry about all the things you read in magazines about, well, this is eating pattern to really crank up metabolic rate. It's a small piece of the pie. What we want to focus on are the impact players, which is basal metabolism. We can change that with strength training. And then physical activity in general, we can change that with good decision making, right? No one tells me, Jim, whether I'm going to take a walk today. I either choose or choose not to take that walk. So we can do those things, but we're not going to mess around with thermic response to feeding. So having said that, what do you do? Okay? You said, okay, I want this guy to go higher. What do I do? Well, of course, you saw this one coming, right? You're going to have to strength train, but why should we strength train? Why, other than this guy in front of you saying, hey, you got to strength train because you're a member at MedFitness, why really should you strength train? What's the biology behind this? Well, number one is when you strength train, see if I can get a writing instrument here. I actually have a couple ways to burn more calories. There's the workout itself, right? If Marianne does a good, tough, full-body workout, maybe it takes a little less than 25 minutes, right, to get that workout in. she's burning calories, right? You guys realize that. You are expending energy when you work out. Now, the rough numbers that we use for a man is about 200 calories for a workout. For ladies, we use 150, but it can be 200. We just do that as a general reference because usually men weigh more than women. So, but somewhere between 150 to 200 calories for a full body strength workout. Now, if you just do the math on that, Bill, we're working out twice a week, right? So I've got 200 times 2, 400 times 52. This equates to about 20,000 calories in a year. So this is about 6 pounds of energy in 1 year, Mary, that you're burning just with, we call it the 1% rule. If you invest 1% of your week, which is less than an hour, over 168 hours in a week, right? That's less than 1%. You can expend off about 6 pounds of energy through that behavior. So number one is the workout itself does burn calories, okay? And I know you know that, but just to kind of put some numbers to it. So this is about 6 pounds of energy in a year. Then there's the epoch. This is the calories you burn after the workout, Karen. So we know that anytime metabolic rate goes up, Nancy, above baseline, it has to slowly return to normal. We call that homeostasis. So what happens with strength training is that because the workout is damaging skeletal muscle, your body has to recover for the next 3 to 4 days. This is a good thing. Again, we're going against our DNA. But we're doing things that do raise metabolic rate. So how many of you have heard this from me before? You are burning about 7 to 10% more calories per day for the next 3 to 4 days when we look at basal metabolic rate. So take me as an example. I'm just over 190 pounds. My basal metabolic rate times 0.8, if I get between 7 to 10% increase, times 0.8, it's about 112 extra calories a day, Monty, that I will burn 3 to 4 days after the workout. This isn't a 4-hour afterburn. This is a 4-day afterburn. So I'm sitting on the couch maybe 4 days later. I'm still burning calories from that workout 4 days ago. This is the body recovering from the damage to the skeletal muscle, which is essentially what strength training is. It's a micro trauma to your muscles, and that's what we do want to do. That's a good thing here. This is a productive, not a damaging micro trauma, but it's a productive trauma to your skeletal muscle. So that epoch, I factored out what it would be for me. If you're going to go up 7 to 10%, I've got 112 calories, 2 workouts, right? I calculated just under 700 calories for myself, okay? So I'm going to get another 700 calories a week engaged in that behavior, and this translates into about 10 pounds a year. Afterburn. Libby, you did the workout, you're home, you're having a cup of coffee, and you're telling Tony that he did something wrong, you're still burning calories, right? You're still burning calories 1, 2, 3, 4 days later, not even thinking about that workout. So this is one of the beautiful things about strength training. Aerobic exercise doesn't do it. Amphetamines don't do this. Drug therapy doesn't do it. Nothing does it. The only way to do this is to induce post-workout damage to your skeletal muscle. So we get this 7 to 10% increase, and this ends up being, just to keep it simple, about 10 pounds of energy per year for literally doing nothing. Go home and rest, you're going to burn another 10 pounds of calories this year because you did the strength workouts twice a week. And then there's the increase in lean body mass, so the muscle and bone, right? We know that strength training increases skeletal muscle. We know that it also stimulates osteoblasts and bone tissue. So as those go up, for every pound you gain, Monty, it's about 7 calories a day. Now, that doesn't seem like a huge number. On a daily basis, 7 isn't big, but if you're gaining muscle, how many of you, without being too specific here, when you came to MedFitness, you had not been strength training prior to coming to MedFitness? Who would say yes to that answer? So some, yeah, more than most of you had not been strength trained. So if you're not strength trained as an adult, you are losing lean mass, you're losing bone, and you're losing skeletal muscle. And so you came to some degree with a deficit in terms of lean mass. And so what we're doing is we're rebuilding lost muscle tissue. And so we're increasing it. So I'm going to give you a super conservative number. A full body strength workout, Nancy, working hard the way you're working twice a week over time. It's conservative to suggest that we could gain at least 5 pounds of muscle training this way, but it's most likely more, but I'm being super conservative. Let's say we add 5 pounds of muscle to your body, so the scale goes up because of that, because that weighs something, right? So if I look at 5 pounds of muscle, right, of course 5 times 7, that's 35. So it's an extra 35 calories per day. But again, if I stretch that out over time is where that becomes significant. So that ends up being about 3.5 pounds a year if we do the math on this as well. 3.5 a year. So what we're saying here, when you look at a 25-minute workout twice a week, less than 1% a week, you can metabolically expend somewhere to the tune of 6 plus 10 plus 3.5, almost 20 pounds of energy burned off by investing 1% of your strength training. Now the key to do this is that you have to work hard enough. Now I'm going to take Bill as a good example. Bill really works hard. So those workouts, Bill, they're only productive to the degree that you are asking your body to do something it can't do. Our body loves to keep things the same, and it will fight to keep things the same only by disrupting that process and asking it to do something it's not used to doing, like a heavier weight, an extra rep, whatever it is, a technique that we throw at you. Only by asking your body to do something it doesn't like to do or it's not accustomed to will it adapt. This is called overcompensation. And it's that adaptive response, Monty, that causes all of this to happen. It's that adaptive response that causes all these changes. So the body's preparing itself, Nancy. So you literally come into your strength workout and your goal is to have sort of this assault on your skeletal muscles. Go as hard as you can for 25 minutes, go home, rest and recover. All of this happens as a sort of post-workout effect to that strength workout. So this is very good news. Again, no other behavior on the planet does this. Only resistance exercise will induce these sorts of metabolic adaptations, okay? All right, everyone with me so far? So let's say you did this and you're working hard and you're cranking out these calories and everything looks good. Well, then what else should I do? Should I just go home and lay around all day? Well, the answer is no. You're not going to go lay around all day. So what we want to do, we call this training your muscles, right? When you come to MedFitness, it's strength training. That's meaningful, challenging, productive work, Libby. The opposite of what we would have done 100 years ago, right? People would have killed you if you would have said, hey, I'm going to go pay someone, go into this small room, and I'm going to go lift these heavy blocks of steel for about a half hour, really be uncomfortable, and then leave and do it again. They say there's something wrong with you, right? That's crazy. So, but here we are doing this, and then we're going to say that you should go out and use your muscles. You've now built them, Jim. It's like a car. Well, I guess you could just leave the car in the garage, but most people would argue, go use the car, enjoy the car, have fun with that car, and so on. So we're going to say the same thing when it comes to your body, Anna Marie. We want you to use your muscles. You just trained them, now we should go use them. How much should we use them? To what degree should I use my muscles? Well, if we look at all the agencies that make recommendations for body weight regulation, the number 2,000 keeps showing up. And you've heard this from me before. We want to expend off at least 2,000 calories per week through some planned physical activity. This is using your muscles. So let's do the math on that. If you take 2,000, I get 200 a crack, right? 2 strength workouts a week. That leaves me with 1,600 a week. So I'm saying I need to burn off 1,600 here. How do I do that? Well, I take my weight, and I know that for me, if I like to go out and take a brisk walk, I'm getting about 7.5 calories per minute. Now, I'm just throwing a lot of numbers at you. These are easy to calculate if you want help calculating these numbers. But I know for a brisk 15 to 17 minute mile walk, which I did over in West Chicago today, I'm burning about 7.5 calories a minute. So for me to burn what I need to burn to reach 2,000, it just happens to be exactly 30 minutes. Now, we hear that number a lot, but it just happens to be 30 for me based on my rate of walking, body weight, etc. It's a little bit different depending upon the individual size and the pace of the activity. But so for me, if I walk 30 minutes every day, use my muscles for a brisk walk 30 minutes every day on top of my 2 strength workouts, I'll be at that 2,000 calories that we're recommending. All right. So what we don't want to do is say, hey, I strength trained. Now my goal is just to live like the average adult and look for the remote control for the remote control. That's not how we want to live. That's an easy thing to have happen in today's culture, but we don't want to do that. Now, here's a quick note about this, which is today, unfortunately, even in the exercise science arena and with fitness professionals, there's a lot of disagreement around how relevant exercise is, surprisingly. And some people will say, well, it's useless. It does nothing for you in terms of weight loss. And while I would disagree with that, what it does do is it changes your brain chemistry with absolute certainty. One of the most renowned psychiatrists in the world is at Harvard Medical School. John Ratey is his name. He wrote a book on this issue of how exercise changes brain chemistry. And he summarized his book by saying that exercise is an essential nutrient for the brain. Humans do not function well or optimally with low levels of activity. You can only ask your body to do things it's capable of doing. We don't make good decisions when we're sedentary. Everybody gets this. Everyone I talk to, I say, Mary, you know how after we took that walk or whatever it was we did, we felt better physically, of course, but we were reinforced by that behavior. That got me more likely to make other good decisions in my life. You don't take the walk bill and say, well, now that we got the walk in, let's get 24 donuts as soon as possible. I mean, it could happen, but we don't respond that way. There is a change in the biochemistry of your brain when you take that 20-minute walk. In fact, a review of 78 studies published in the Journal of Psychosomatic Research, just was over 10 years ago, a group of psychologists looked at 78 studies and said, hey, let's figure out what happens to people's brains when they're inactive. Guess what? Big surprise. They called it unusual stress on brain chemistry is what they saw in the people who are inactive. Guess how much activity it took to relieve this? A 10-minute walk relieved them of this. So we're in a society where we drive to work, we sit at work, we go home, we sit, we repeat the whole cycle the next day. So we call this sitting disease, of course. So my point here is that, yes, strength training matters, and we want you to do it, and it's constructive. Using your body matters. It does burn calories, but possibly more important, Tony, is how it affects your brain. Very likely more important is how it affects your brain. And when that happens, Bill, your decision-making changes. In our field, we call this synergy. We call it synergy. And there's a connectedness. Monty knows this because he heard it 2 decades ago. So when you're active, you think differently and you behave differently. So you can't think your way into the behavior, you have to behave your way into the thinking. So go out, take the walk, whatever it is for you, and you'll be on that path to making better food decisions. And I think I'm noticing that there's a degree of you understanding the sort of the truth behind this, is that when you do this, you're more invested in yourself and you're more invested in living well. So we've said strength training matters. We got to train hard. We get all these benefits of strength training. We want to burn 2,000 calories in a week, and probably maybe half of the benefit is this whole brain chemistry issue that nobody talks about. Almost nobody talks about it. But it's meaningful. It's very significant. So, having said that, everyone with me right now? So, you have a chance, and you're already doing this, Libby, right? You're already doing what you can do to modify metabolic rate with your strength workouts. One workout does all this. You don't got to micromanage it. Just do the workout. You get all these benefits. I want to go use my body, right, Mary? It doesn't end with the strength. I got to go use my body for multiple reasons, physical and mental. And then how do I reconcile that with food? Well, here's the thing, guys. In our 2018 world, we have billion-dollar marketing campaigns that move at the speed of light for food, right? Food, you can't escape it, Jim. It's everywhere. It's very different than what it was just 1 generation ago when I was growing up. So today, we have what we refer to as the gap. It simply is the way to describe the difference between what is recommended versus what the average American does. And the gap between those two is our environment. Nobody wakes up. Nobody says, hey, my goal, 3 chocolate donuts today. About 2:30, maybe a bag of chips later in the day. They don't say that, but it happens so easily in our culture. So here's how we want you to think about your food. You can do this, and it's helpful and productive and healthy. You can use your muscles, go burn calories, have better brain chemistry. But if you're doing all of that in literally 90 seconds, Monty, 90 seconds, I can vaporize 4.5 to 5 hours of exercise in 90 seconds of eating the wrong food. My example tonight is a muffin. Muffins are about 100 calories an ounce. So if you give me an average muffin, it's about 5 ounces. It'll take me about 90 seconds to eat that muffin. I've just vaporized 4.5 to 5 hours of productive, intense work. So all the more reason why we want to be attentive to what's happening with our food. I'm not saying you got to walk a tightrope, and that's a whole nother discussion. But Bill, you can't expect to say, I'm doing all this great exercise, blah, blah, blah. Why is my weight not changing? Well, because 2/3 of the equation is what we eat. That'll never change. That is just basic human biology. So my take-home message is that do these things, but don't overlook the piece about using your body. You guys are already strength trained, and we want you to keep strength trained. It's critically important. It's even more important the older you get, right? As you age, if you're losing muscle, Libby, imagine if you're losing muscle, getting weaker, more fatigued, unable to do things, that metabolic rate drops like a rock. So I want to stay strong to keep it up. But over time, that effect on your brain is magnified. And so we can't afford to have this happen. Do you realize that we now know that your brain is plastic? Do you know what that means? Brain plasticity, have you ever heard that term before? It simply means we can change your brain. We didn't know that 40, 50 years ago. We didn't know that you could change your skeletal muscle 50 years ago. We thought once you turned 60, let's just put you into the death camp because you're on your way out. So, right? That was the mentality back in the 60s. Now we know the opposite is true. If you're 90, I can reverse that weakness in a couple of weeks. But the same thing with your brain. Brain size increases when you use it. I'm talking physical activity. When we increase blood flow to the brain, the hippocampus gets larger, the frontal lobe gets larger. All these things get larger and more functional, and they function better when they're getting nutrients and oxygen and blood and all the critical things that they need. But if you sit around doing nothing, Libby, the brain shrinks the same way your muscles shrink. So this is called brain plasticity. We discovered this probably 20 years ago. So that only happens if you're doing things challenging enough on a regular basis. So to conclude here this evening, let's say that you are going home and you said, hey, that was an interesting talk Rich gave tonight. Do we have any cookies in the cabinet, honey? Yeah, I'm not saying that that can't be something that happens now and then, right? I mean, Joanne will tell you I'm a sweets guy, so I have to manage things. But do the things that you can do. We can't control Randall Road. That is a calorie bomb waiting to explode every day. But what we can do is we can go do a strength workout. I can go take a walk. And I can be cognizant of the fact that food is the big picture here. I'm doing these things for my health, and it's good for me, Mike, but I still have to factor in the food factor here, because that will wipe out everything in a heartbeat from a metabolic weight standpoint. Okay. Okay. It is a miracle that I finished on time this evening. If you have any questions about this subject matter, I'm here. I appreciate you coming tonight. And Joanne, is there anything to add to what I've said here?